All right. It is time for the show. I am not your host, but apparently bald presenters were on sale. So I am what you have today. This is the Data and API shows, and our host extraordinaire is out sick today. So I am here to lead off the show. And today I am joined by Mr. Gavin, who I'm adding to the stage now. Gavin, say hello. Tell us what you do.
Hi, my name is Gavin, and I do code stuff here at Hasura. My official title is Technical Evangelist and Community.
His unofficial title is Wizard of all things TypeScript and typed languages. So that's the unofficial title that we're going to go with today. I do technical marketing. So today we're going to be doing kind of a bit of a different show. I think on the menu is a meetup clone, if I recall correctly. Does that sound about right?
Yeah.
So we're going to do a meetup clone. Gavin will do the smart looking stuff, and I will be paid to ask the dumb questions representing the community at large. So Gavin, if you're ready, let's just jump into it.
Yeah.
Have I given you permission to share your screen? That's something I have to figure out.
Let's see if it works. So if I can share my entire screen. And then can you all see this?
Not seeing it just yet. I think I have to add it to the stream here. I figured out my part. Now it's all you.
Okay. Let me know.
Which we do see your screen, so it's.
Okay. Okay, we
good.
do.
Sorry.
Okay. No,
that was hidden.
Right. Okay. So yeah, the kind of the thing that I wanted to walk through today is a somewhat realistic application. And so I'm sure a lot of you guys are familiar with Meetup, and it's a cool application to try to model in a short time frame because the core data model isn't super complex. And so this is a really neat tool. If you haven't heard of it, it's called DB Diagram. But it lets you use a sort of domain-specific language that they have to model your database tables, and it will lay it out into an entity relationship diagram for you. And so we're going to start by kind of walking through setting up these models in Hasura and how you would think through these models. And then the second thing that we're going to do is maybe set up, a basic permission system that you might see in a system like this. And then we're going to wire that into a sort of Next.js React TypeScript front end. And we'll kind of just see how far we get. And with that, we're going to cheat a little bit. So I have a subscription to something called shuffle.dev, which is a sort of WYSIWYG builder that lets you kind of build UIs drag and drop from components. And they have a bunch of stuff. Tailwind UI is one of them. And so we're just going to sort of heavily borrow from these Tailwind UI components and try to fit them in there and not really worry too much about what they look like. So yeah, so I guess starting from the beginning, let's kind of talk through the data model. So if I comment this out, the core of this, the idea is that we have a meetup, and obviously you need a primary key. These created at and updated at, we don't really need them. They're just nice to have. But a meetup is going to have a location, which this is text, but in reality, you would probably want to have that be a foreign key to some other table. We'll let a meetup have a description. We'll give it a name. We'll allow an image URL to be uploaded, and then, of course, the date and time that the meetup is happening. And then the other thing that we'll need is we're going to need users. So we'll need a user table. And this won't be anything fancy. And I think instead of username, I'm just going to change that to email for the sake of this demo. So we have a user table. And what we need is we need a way for users to join meetups. And we also want to allow them to comment on meetups. And so we need two kind of intermediary tables. One is that we need a meetup comment. And so basically, this is going to be a table that bridges, if you see here, some user and a meetup. And that's just going to take the ID of the user, the ID of the meetup, and let them add text to it. And then the other table that we're going to need is meetup users. And this table is what is going to bridge our user and our meetup as far as attendance goes. And so that's kind of the outline of the data model. And we'll just walk through kind of setting this up from scratch, and we'll see how far we get. So the very first thing that I have, I'll kind of walk through the outline of the repository. I have a Docker compose.yaml, which has a Postgres and Hasura in it. And then the rest of this repo is just a kind of a Next.js starter. So I've got this like index page, which if you see here is just one of these kind of filler Tailwind UI pages. It's actually this one right here. And yeah, the rest of this is just a little bit of empty scaffolding around Next.js, and we'll fill this in as we go. And so the first thing that we're going to want to do is we need to set up our Hasura and our Postgres stack. And so to do that, we can just say Docker compose up, and we'll pass -d because we want that to run in the background. And if I open my Docker tab here, then we should see this start to pop up in a second under a new container group. And of course, this is going to pull this because this version was published yesterday. Fortunately, Postgres version 13, I use that all the time, so I have that one cached. And we'll just wait a second.
One of the downsides of having an awesome dev team making like frequent releases.
Right, yeah.
More new stuff?
Yeah.
Fine. Now, when you work with the DB IO thing, which I am now fully in love with, do you typically prefer to then just remodel those from scratch, or will you export like the Postgres SQL statement out of that?
Yeah, that's a really good point. So this basically what Jesse's talking about is that one of the like really cool features about this, besides being able to like save this diagram and like share it and have a history of it, is that you can import from an existing schema. So if we had Postgres or MySQL, then we could import that. And we can actually export this. So for example, this bottom one is an image if you wanted to like share it online, but we can export to PostgreSQL. And if I click that button and I take a look at this, then you'll see that we actually have kind of a migrations file here. And these would give us all of the Hasura tables and relationships that we needed. I think the only thing that is messed up here is that I didn't put primary key on this. So if I change this to integer, and then this has to be, I think, PK.
PK, yeah.
Yeah, so if I set these like this, and then there's a special syntax for compound primary keys. So we'll just skip that for now. But if I export this again, then now you'll see that this is an integer primary key, not null. This still won't necessarily work because it isn't a sequence, and I think there is a way to do that if you pass serial. But what we would just do is we would change this. We would change integer primary key to, you could use serial, but the Postgres wiki specifically says don't do that, and I could elaborate on the reasons why, but the short of it is that under the hood it converts into something called an owned sequence, and if you ever have to migrate those, the ownership of the sequences cause you a lot of headaches. And so the recommended way to create integer primary keys in Postgres, if you're on a version that supports it, which I think is Postgres 11 or 12 or higher, is to do ID integer. It's like this. So it's, say, ID integer generated by default as identity, and these are called identity columns, and they work similar to serial columns, except that they don't have the sequence problem, and then this would be primary key. So we could basically just replace this with this. That okay. And now we could technically just import this directly into Hasura, and it would totally work. And we would just need to track those tables. I don't know if we should do that or if we should show the process of like manually creating those tables just for people that might not be familiar with it, because there are some things like setting up foreign key references. So maybe I can just
we can modify them afterwards and show the foreign key references after the fact, right?
Sure, yeah, we can do that. So if you look here now in my Docker tab, what I have is this meetup demo for data API show, and I have Hasura, which if you hover over these, you can see port 8080 is bound to 8080 on the container. If you click this, it will actually take you to it. If I can manage to get there without breaking it. Oh boy, slow and steady. There you go. Yeah, so there's how that goes. And then this is our Postgres, and this isn't forwarded anywhere. I've just put something really good for the secret here, which is my secret. So we enter here. And kind of the way that this works is if you want to enter straight SQL, then what you do is you kind of take this, you put it in here, and there's this box down here that says track this. And if you hover over it, it basically says if you're creating, if you're creating anything that could be exposed over the GraphQL API, this is what you want checked if you want this to be automatically tracked. Otherwise, we would need to manually track it. And so I will just run that. Hopefully this doesn't fail. And then now you can see that we have these meetup user, meetup comment tables already created. And so if we look at this, we can see, go to modify, foreign keys, meetup comment, modify. So we have these foreign keys here, and these are maybe something that are a little bit trickier. So just for the sake of showing something, I'm going to make a completely fake table and add it to user, just to show the process of adding a foreign key. So if I go to public, and it'll say untracked foreign key relationships. We want to track all these, and that is what will add them in the GraphQL API. And I'll show you why this is. So basically it's saying, hey, we have all these SQL foreign key relationships. So like I know that meetup and meetup comment are connected. I know that user and meetup comment are connected, but they aren't tracked. And what does that mean? It means that when I go to user, even though those have a foreign key in the database, I can't query through GraphQL and ask for that field. So these are kind of just isolated. See, it has a meetup ID and it has a user ID, but I can't query meetup user and ask for the meetup, even though it's connected through a foreign key to the meetup and to the user. And so the way that we tell Hasura, hey, I want you to make the GraphQL relationships for this is by tracking those foreign key relationships. So now if I go ahead and I track all of these and we come back to the API, then that sort of same query, what did we do? We did meetup user, yeah. So we'll go meetup user. And so I have the meetup ID and the user ID, but now I'm also able to query and drill down through meetup, and I'm able to query and drill down through user. And what that's really gone and done under the hood is that on this relationships tab, you'll see it's created an object relationship, which if you're familiar with like Rails or JPA, like Hibernate and Spring and Java, anything like that, this is sort of has one relationship. And then array is a has many relationship. So if we look at the inverse side of this, so if a meetup user has one meetup, then the opposite means that meetup has to have many meetup users, because that's the inverse relationship. So the process of doing this, if you're going to do it yourself, let's create a table called to-do, and let's say that a user has to-dos. So we would say create table to-do, and I highly recommend using frequently used columns here. These give you created at and updated at, which these aren't just regular columns. These automatically generate triggers as well. So when you update the record, it'll automatically update here. But I'm going to go ahead and say that I want identity generated by default, since this is the best practice. And then sure, created at, updated at. And then for the foreign key, we want to attach it to a user. So we say user ID is of type integer. And then now a to-do is going to have like task, which is text. So what is the to-do for? Now, the way that you add these relationships manually when you're creating tables in Hasura is here you would say add a foreign key. And you can do this after you create the table or during, so don't really worry about it if you forget. But the way that it works is it'll ask for a reference schema, which we only have public, so that stays there. And the reference table is, like as it says, the table that we're referencing. So to-dos is referencing user. And it's doing that by making a reference from the user ID column to the reference table user.id. And then here you can handle things like on update and on delete the actions. But we'll just leave that as is. And this will also let you make compound foreign key relationships if you need more than one field. So if we save, then now you can see it's like, hey, okay, user ID, that is what kind of joins this table to user through the ID. So then we add a table, and now we have this table to do. And
if I'm correct, Gavin, if you were to add that, I think maybe we're just about to show it. Never mind. Show your next step, and then I'll see if that answered the question I was going to raise.
Basically, that at this point, nothing is usable.
Yeah, that you have to go to Relationships tab.
Yeah. So at this point, even so, Jesse's saying, at this point, even though we have a user ID and that's a foreign key, we can't get to user. It's just not an option. It's not an option on either side. It's not an option from user. It's not an option from to-do. And so that's what this untracked foreign key relationship is. It's suggesting both sides of this. And so what we didn't see before is that once you create a relationship, you need to do both sides. And so it'll suggest, Hasura is smart enough to see this foreign key and say, hey, I know that this is the has one side of the relationship. It should be an object. And I'm going to suggest you call the relationship this user, and you just click save. And now at this point, if we come back and we click to do, now to do has user, and we can say to do.user.id, but we still don't have user.todo. We don't have the inverse. And so we have to go to the opposite table, and you'll see this here, and this bracket means array. We have to go to the opposite table, which is user, relationships, and again, it will suggest it. And we'll say, yeah, that's right. User does have a list of to-dos, save it. And then as Jesse was saying, now when we query user, we can ask for the to-dos and ID and task. And then we can do all sorts of fun stuff where we just go from users to to-dos to users to to-dos. Yeah, don't do that. That's why you have query depth limiting. Yeah, so that's basically how foreign keys and kind of modeling those things in the database in Hasura work. Unfortunately, I only have one monitor, so I actually can't do this and look at the chat at the same time. Did anybody have questions about that process?
I'm watching chat, so I'll let you know if something comes up.
Okay, no
Only question so far is if we'll share the code.
Sure, yeah, absolutely, we'll share the code. I can't do it right now, but we will link it afterwards. Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and delete this table because I don't want this to be. I do not want this table to be in the
polluting your API.
Yeah. So the way that I do this is modify, delete table, to do. And I think it's going to tell me I can't do that because I have dependent objects and relationships, yeah. Which means that I need to just remove this. And then on user as well, I need to remove the opposite of that.
And the reason you're cleaning this up is because you're going to be generating some type tooling, which will be creating permanent objects inside of the code base. So it's just a little bit of hygiene now is going to save us some messy interface later on.
Yeah, and this would have generated probably like 500 to 600 lines of TypeScript code when we get to that point. So we're just going to pull that out.
What would be an example of using a foreign key? Or not a foreign key? When would be an example of using a compound foreign key? I haven't come across too many cases where that seems like a necessary function. What's a common use case for a compound foreign keys?
Yeah, so like for example, this table, this could have been modeled better since this is just a join table. This could have been a compound primary key. So instead of having ID as the primary key, which is a bit silly because this doesn't really uniquely identify the column, a combination of user ID and meetup ID really should have been the primary key here. Now a compound foreign key, I think that there's been kind of one instance where that's been useful, which is where it was an events system, and basically users could subscribe to the exact same event record. So let's say like the so let's say we have like event and like the ID is like 1. The thing is, this event could have multiple date times. And so it was a compound foreign key, and the foreign key relationship was on basically event.id and then like event.date time or something like that. Because you needed both the date and time of the event and the ID, since there were like multiple instances of it. I can't really come up with a better one off the top of my head. The easier one is compound primary keys, where when you have join tables, the primary key for meetup user really should have been user ID and meetup ID. And this combination is what you kind of uniquely identifies a meetup user record, and this would have been more efficient from a database perspective and the indexes. But yeah, okay, so yeah, so if we would have done that here, it would have been the I could get in the weeds here, but basically it would be like this. It'd be like primary key, user ID, meetup ID. It'd be like that basically, and then you don't even need this. You don't even get an ID because you don't. These join tables, they don't really even need an ID. They just need these two combined because there will never be an overlapping record of. You can't have a meetup user that is in the same meetup twice. Like user ID 1 can't be put into meetup 1 twice. So that's basically why if you just had this as the primary key, that would enforce that.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So at this point, what we have, and maybe we should put some data in here. So let's just go and user1 at example.com and password. And let's create a meetup. And we'll just put this location will be online. Description. Hasura stuff. Hasura event. Image URL. Wow, these are some really weird stock photos. Okay. And then date time, we will just go with now.
I just recently came across, I think it's UI avatars. It's donated and or generated avatars. So using what's that called, the GAN network. So the neural net generated fake faces, and that's a whole bunch of UI avatars for that. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a really neat use case for them. Wow, you would think there would be less weird examples when you Google stock photos. Okay, so now we have some data there. And we want to put this user inside a meetup. So we'll go and say user ID 1, meetup ID 1, insert, and meetup comment, user ID 1, meetup ID 1, text, this meetup is going to be awesome. All right. So now what we have essentially is we'll just start from the meetup and we'll kind of query down. So we'll grab this stuff and then we will grab meetup comments with the text, and we'll grab the user and we'll grab their email. So now if we do that, then we see this. So this is going to be kind of the shape of our data. And we could also grab the meetup users list if we wanted to display those. So, and then grab the user, we could grab their email. So yeah, this will kind of be the shape of the data that our front end would receive. And you can imagine kind of having like a tile, which is what we'll do. So we'll kind of tile these. And then underneath each of the meetup tiles, we'll display like a comments list. And we can use meetup users to put like little bubble avatars that contain like the user's emails, like first letter or something, depending on how much time we have. Okay. That was a lot of information. All right, so one thing that we haven't done at all is talked about permissions. And so the thing is that I'm going to go ahead right now and just say that anonymous can kind of do anything. and we will refine this as we go. So we'll do that, and we will see if we can clone this, clone permissions for basically, this should be for select, this should be for update anonymous, and this should be for delete anonymous, and save permissions. Okay, sweet. And now if I do the same thing for comments, permissions, anonymous, insert without any checks, toggle all, save permissions, and clone permissions to select anonymous, update anonymous, insert, delete anonymous, save. Okay. So this is really terrible and you shouldn't do this, but the reason why I'm doing this is so when we start to plug this into the UI, we don't have to jump through a bunch of hoops and be authenticated right off the bat. We can work through authentication given we have enough time, but otherwise it'll just be easier if, for the sake of testing, we can kind of just do this. Also, the clone permissions feature is really useful, and I feel like not everybody may know about it. Okay. And last one.
One thing worth pointing out as well is a good use case for this project would also be the schema sharing that we've just recently released, where you'd be able to upload this model and everything else to a GitHub repo and be able to pull that down and bootstrap the Hasura application with data model intact using schema sharing, which is a pretty fantastic way to share your project or the code you want people to look at, and they can start off from the exact same starting place. That's a pretty great way to work as well.
Yeah. So on that note, you'll see that under the templates gallery here. And so if you're ever curious about how you might do something, we have schema sharing templates that you can one-click install into your app, and they go over individual features, and you can use those to get a sense of how you might do something. Or like Jesse was saying, in this scenario, we could have made a schema sharing template and just sent it to you, and then you could click a button and you'd have the exact same schema. So now that that is all set up, then everything should be good. All right, we're going to move on to the front end piece of this now. And I'm going to swap these because I don't like coding with that on the right-hand side. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to generate a sort of typed SDK for our database. And this is basically the best thing since sliced bread. And if you don't agree with that, then we're just going to have to agree to disagree because no one will ever change my opinion. But the way that this works is there's a couple of tools that can do this. The one that we're going to use today is just the one that I have the most experience with, and it's called GraphQL Zeus. You can find it here. It's made by the makers of this tool, GraphQL Editor, which is pretty cool. It's like a ERD and GUI editor for your GraphQL API and types. But anyways, basically what it does in short is it looks at your GraphQL schema and it spits out types for any possible query that you could run. So it uses a little bit of TypeScript magic to look at the arguments that you pass to the query, and then based on those arguments, it'll infer the return type automatically. And because it's just types, then you can adapt it to work with anything. And what I mean by that is in this utils folder, I have this GQL Zeus hooks. And what this is this is wrapper around Apollo client that are using the types. And so it turns Apollo client into a fully type-safe client. And you can do this for anything. You can do this for React query. You can do this for Urkel. You can do this for just plain node fetch. It doesn't matter, but it's really, really cool. And so we're gonna kind of walk through how you use this in a practical standpoint. And so inside of the package.json, there's this generate GQL client, and this is going to send a request to the GraphQL endpoint and spit out the results into this utils/generated folder. This is going to fail because for this app, I've turned on authentication. And so I need to pass a header, and I need to say Hasura admin secret is my dash secret. And then I think that should work. We'll see if it does. So let's go ahead and do this. And we will do yarn generate GQL client. Done. Okay, yep, that seems to work. So now if we look in utils generated, no, that did not seem to work. One moment, let me look at the header.
Are you using the Hasura console API, or are you using the right localhost address?
Yeah, I definitely am. Let's see here. Okay, there we go. All right, so you cannot use a space in between the header and the value. And that was it. Okay, and so now what that has done is, if we look at this, it has just generated this massive 7,000 line file. And if we look, for example, like Meetup, these contain TypeScript type mappings of basically everything in our project. And kind of the way that it works is, let's go ahead and grab the, this will be a good one to kind of show off, I think. So we'll just grab this, do client dot query. And now when you see here, when I press Control Space and autocomplete, it actually shows every single operation in our GraphQL API, and it shows us the types for all of them. So if I wanted to query for Meetup, then I do this. This first object is arguments. So I could say where, and then ID equals, and if I try to put like ASD here, it'll automatically tell you type string, not assignable to type number. So everything is type checked. So where ID underscore equals 1, and then for a selection set, then you just pass true for every prop that you want. So we would say meetup ID name true, and then let's say like meetup users, which again, this is going to take a filter, but we'll leave the filter empty. We just want all of them. And we'll grab user, and we want user email true, and user, that's probably just fine, user email. So the cool thing about this is that if you look at the result type, it's a promise, but then if we look at the promise type, it only contains the fields that we selected, and it contains their proper TypeScript type. So we've selected ID and name, and then dug into meetup users and grabbed meetup users.user.email. And so here you see we have ID and name, which it correctly knows ID is a number, name is a string. And then it knows that we have an array of objects of meetup user, where user is an object that has email that's a string. So this is just really crazy powerful to be able to press, a hotkey in your IDE and then get your application's entire type safe documented API right there. So let us consume the app then. So in index.tsx, we have a bunch of sort of just nonsense here. The first thing that I want to do is I want to query and get this information. And so if I wanted to translate this query, then I can basically take this, we'll grab this and we'll comment it out, and we'll use that as a starting spot. Then what I can do is I can import this function that is the wrapper function, which is used typed. Let's do use type subscription. This will be live data. And so basically we would select the first argument will be kind of nothing. And then the second argument, so we will select meetup. First argument would be empty. Second one is going to be all of these, uncommented, and then we're just going to put true after all of them. Okay, so we'll start with that, and then we'll do const equals. We have loading data error. And if we look at data, again, data is the shape of exactly what we selected. If I remove everything but ID, then it knows that we're just going to get ID back. That's a number. Super cool. So we can start with this, and then we'll fill in the rest of this in a second. But let's just show this working for now. And we will do something really simple. So replace with your content. So basically here we can say data.meetup.map it. And what will we return? We can just do a div with it. Why does it not like this?
Can you boost that font size a little bit?
Yeah.
So you're trying to map over. Are you opening with a curly? Oh, okay.
Okay, so then we can do it description, and basically and here. Why does it not like this one?
I can't see, but are you opening with the right bracket syntax for your array there? Is that a square bracket or a curly bracket there?
This?
Above your right there on that line. Is that a square bracket or a curly bracket?
That is curly bracket.
Okay. Nice.
So basically, I'm just going to make this return. Okay, that's fine. It likes that. Okay, so we'll put div it.description. We'll wrap this in a fragment. And we'll basically copy paste this a bunch. So description, again, autocomplete, location. We'll put date, time. And then we will put an image with src equals it dot image URL. Okay, so we have that. Let's see what's running in a terminal. Okay, Next.js is still running. And let's see what happens. Yep, I definitely need to use that.
We got a question there from the audience. Should I use named queries for optimization? As far as I'm aware, naming your queries is great for observability and tracking down what was being requested from where. There's not any kind of query optimization that happens just by default of naming it, is there? Or maybe I'm missing something.
Naming the operation won't do anything. It's mostly for observability. I would name them because you don't really lose out on anything. Usually so the optimizations happen two ways. There's basically two ways to cache GraphQL stuff. There's a really dumb way where you kind of cache the hash of the contents. So the actual query string itself, if you know it's something that's not like a mutation, then you can hash it and say, I've already served this within X amount of time. The second way is the way that like most clients like Apollo and Urkel do, which is where they use like fields on the actual data to cache it. And that's usually configurable too. But as far as just naming your operations, it shouldn't, it won't make a big deal as far as like performance or anything. It's more of just like you being able to observe it.
Yeah.
Let's go with this. So then I can look at the headers. GraphQL, variables, response. Okay, let's just take out the var token. I think there's boilerplate code in here. And there we go. Okay, sweet. So now we are pulling back data. And if I switch this back to a subscription, let's see what we get. Does it still work or is it broken? Refresh the page. It loads. Okay, sweet. So real time, let's go ahead and add a new event in here. So we will then go to Meetup, and what we can do is basically clone the row, and we'll say the description is Hasura other stuff, and this will be Hasura event 2. Placeholder image. Yeah, I've got to be safe with this one. How do you use this? SSC. Is this going to work with? Okay, sweet. Let's go like that, maybe. Okay, and hopefully this works. So we'll save it, and boom. Immediately we have another event that has popped up, and we can see that there. It's not pretty, and let's just go ahead and factor this in so that it pulls back user comments as well. So hopefully this is a good size. What we're going to do here is say meetup comments with no filter criteria, selecting the text true and the user email true. And now our data looks like this. So we can dig into meetup comments, read the text out of them, and then also read the user's email. So we'll do that. We'll come down here and all of this noise. And let's make this a UL, trusty friend, UL, and use an LI, and this is what we're going to return. Okay, so cut this out, and then we basically say it.meetupcomments.map comment, and close that off. Basically, we'll return an LI that has comment.text, and we will say comment.user.email said, and then let's make this italic, and let's make this bold. /b, and then I think I might have to wrap the whole thing in a span or a P and able to do that whole italic bold thing. I'm not super sure, not a front-end guru. Okay, so now we have this really cool, all type safe. We come back here and boom, user1@example.com said, this meetup is going to be awesome. And now we can kind of real time add another comment to the second meetup. So we will make a meetup comment and we'll insert a row again with user1, a meetup ID 2. I will be like, don't think this meetup is going to be very good.
So typical.
All right. And so now if I send this, we should see this pop up here. Hopefully. Oh, meetup comment foreign key. Why does it say, oh, it's 3. The meetup ID is 3. Boom. So real-time user comment. Yada, yada. Spam, spam. So, yeah, this fantastically beautiful UI. I think we're down to like 3 minutes. We didn't get to as much as I maybe would have liked to. There's ideally we kind of would have been able to walk through what it looks like setting up like JWT auth and permissions so that users can like edit their own comments, but not anybody else's comments, and only like admins can post meetups. But yeah, that's about all we had time for today. And we started with literally nothing 58 minutes ago. We had nothing. And now we have a full real-time, CRUD app that looks like a terrible, terrible version of Meetup. If you'll give me the liberty of saying that.
But you know, as they say, if you're not embarrassed by the first version of your product, you've launched too late. So,
right. I mean, if you can do this in an hour, imagine what you can do in a week.
Right. And that's actually, I think, one of the main PowerPoints of the Hasura platform, or that whole flow even, is that what you've done here is you've created solid data models attached with strong typings into a platform. Like, that's the foundation you need to iterate on. There's no technical debt in that at all, except for maybe leaving the API wide open.
Probably
beyond that part, beyond that part, like, that's actually a foundation that you can iterate on, and there's not going to need to be a rewrite very, very fast. So, I mean, this is something that I think is a really powerful concept. It is super impressive what is able to be accomplished in an hour. I mean, it is helpful that Gavin knows what he's doing. So there's that to be said. But like this, really, this is something that's quite straightforward. One of the comments was making a request. Is this something you could use with the new Git deploys? Like, it absolutely is. You could deploy this to GitHub and do the version sync, where you can be checking in your code mods and everything else that you would need, code mods for your migrations, and be able to deploy using the GitHub flows. So this is a really cool example of fast prototyping, the ability to get the best of all worlds when it comes to the GraphQL landscape. Type safe front end, type safe back end, and that does take us right to the very end. I want to just check the quick questions here. What's a good way to do reports with Hasura? I'm assuming that's something in the ballpark of like logging and tracking behavior. That would all be stuff to have a look at with Hasura Cloud. We have a lot of documentation on that, as well as you can use things like Datadog to get good analytics of what's happening with your project and be able to generate reports with that. That's it for today. Thanks to Gavin for giving us that lightning walkthrough of building a startup from scratch in 1 hour.
Last thing, I just want to say, if you haven't experimented with this kind of end-to-end auto-generated type safety, it's really great. I mean, look, I just changed. Is it image URL or image URLs? Put image URLs, and immediately it's like, no, that's not a thing. Or if we try to do math on like strings, like a description times 2, no, that's TypeScript says that's wrong. And so the kind of power that you can get from this, and developer like productivity, just being able to see your whole API right in your editor and have it automatically be safe. If you change a data model and it breaks, it's backwards incompatible, your front end will throw a compiler error. So definitely check this out. But yeah, that's kind of the note that I wanted to end it on.
Yeah, this is developer velocity is a real thing. So that's it for the show. We're going to go ahead and play it out with the outro video. Thanks for showing up today and joining us. And we'll be making this code available for you all to download and enjoy. So have a nice day, everyone. Bye.